So, Tom, I interviewed you almost half a year ago. I think it was end of January, something like that. Really excited to talk to you again to find out what's up with the white fibrous structures, these, what it was called white fibrous clots. Are embalmers still seeing them? What have you found out? And also, now with the new administration in place, what are the heads of the HHS agencies saying, if anything, about these strange white fibrous clots? But first, your trip. Tell me about your trip to the Tennessee funeral director. What was it called? A convention or association?
Yeah, Tennessee Funeral Directors Association's annual convention. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got some big news, Cornelia, since the last time we talked. Of course, again, we're going to be talking about these unusual white fibrous clots that embalmers have been seeing in their corpses. A few of them saw it in 2020, the year of COVID, without the vaccines. But then this phenomenon exploded starting in the year 2021 after the rollout of the COVID vaccines. So there's some suspicion there, right? But we got a big break last December when I was running my third annual worldwide embalmer blood clot survey, of which 301 embalmers responded. We talked about this. 250 of them, 83% actually said they were seeing these white fibrous clots in their corpses. And they were seeing them in an average of 27% of their corpses at that time. While I was conducting that survey with my assistant, Laura Kasner, the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, Mr. Taylor Moore, reached out to me and said, "Hey, Tom, I'd love to have you come talk at our upcoming annual convention in June of 2025 to talk about these white fibrous clots with my embalmers and funeral directors." And that happened back on the 8th of June. So I traveled down to Franklin, Tennessee, just a little bit south of Nashville, and presented about an hour briefing there to these embalmers and funeral directors about the white fibrous clots. What's interesting about this, Cornelia, is I actually have captured on video about 18 of the embalmers with raised hands saying that they are indeed still seeing these white fibrous clots in their corpses through the first half of 2025. And I took a survey there as well, a paper survey, and wound up that they were seeing them in a percentage of about 1 out of every 6 of their corpses, about 17% of their corpses. So this is still a phenomenon. And this is a big deal, right? It's the first time we have official acknowledgement from a United States State Funeral Director Association that these white fibrous clots, like I'm showing the audience, are indeed real and they're prevalent. So that was, and we can go through the slides, and we actually showed the audience, I think, a clip of the embalmers raising their hands. I think you have that clip.
Yes.
And we also go through some slides. Like I said, I did a paper survey with those embalmers, and that was important too, because my assistant and I, we'd like to know what's happening in the first half of 2025. Or is the percentage of corpses with the clots going up, going down? What's going on? So these Tennessee embalmers were kind of our canaries in the coal mine for 2025.
Okay. Yes, and I'm going to show that clip. But before I'll do that, I have a couple of questions. So you said that at this convention, you asked the embalmers present, and 20 they said that they saw these clots in about 17% of the bodies that they embalmed. Correct? So it at least just comparing that number to the number from your 2024 survey, that was 20. They found it in 28% of bodies. So that seems to be a good signal for what it's worth,
sign,
because
right?
because there are all sorts of questions. One question I have is: so was Franklin, Tennessee? How many embalmers? Do you know how many embalmers are there, and funeral directors who also embalm are there in Tennessee?
I don't know how many there are across the whole state. I know how many came to the convention and took my paper survey. There were actually 28, and we'll go through that in the slides if you want to, on the on what I did with the embalmers. But yeah, there were 28 there that took the survey, and of those, 64% said they were still seeing these white fibrous clots in their corpses. So down from the 83% of my worldwide survey. It's a smaller sample size, so we have to take that into consideration as well. But I am encouraged by the fact that they did say they were seeing it in an average of, like you say, 17% of their corpses, as opposed to my last worldwide survey at about 27% of their corpses. So that's a decrease, and we're hopeful that decrease is maintained when we do another worldwide survey at the end of this year. Each
Mhm.
November or December, I do a worldwide survey with a larger, group of United States, Canadian, UK, and Australia, and New Zealand embalmers to see what the whole world is saying. So
Okay. So 18 out of 28 present embalmers raised their hands and said, yes, I've been seeing these white fibrous clots this year in 2025. And you don't
correct.
know how many there are in Tennessee, but there are overall. I think Hirschman said, Richard Hirschman, the embalmer who went public with pictures of what he's pulling out of bodies, these white fibrous clots. He said there are about 3,500 to 4,000 active embalmers in the entire United States. And Tennessee is in the south, so there's probably quite a few more than 28 embalmers. Who knows how many
Yes.
more
Yeah,
in
and I was a little
upstate?
surprised that not more of them came to their convention. I know, for example, a couple of years ago, when Wallace Hooker was in the Died Suddenly movie, he was lecturing at an Ohio Embalmers Association conference in Columbus, Ohio, and he said there were more than 100 embalmers in the room in Ohio back in 2022 when he asked them to raise their hands whether they were seeing the clots, and he said almost all of them did raise their hands saying they were seeing the white fiber clots, and that he captures that in the Died Suddenly movie. But so I was expecting to see a little more than the 28 that showed up. I don't know why, I don't know if it's because there was an expensive trip because of, the cost of the hotel room or whatever. But I did take a survey of the ones that were there. What was interesting, Courtney, is that myself, my assistant Laura Kastner, and her sister Leslie attended this event. And we came in the night before, Saturday night. There was a reception there from like 5 till 7 p.m. And I got a chance to meet most of the funeral directors and embalmers that were going to be at the presentation the next day on Sunday. And when I talked to them, I kind of got the warm fuzzy that they knew about the clots, because one of the very first embalmers I talked to, I was walking around with the vial of the clots, and this other one as well that Richard Hirschman's given me, this even
Yeah,
larger one.
I can just imagine you walking around with these
Yeah.
vials.
Well, when I asked one of the first embalmers, I said, have you been seeing these white fibrous clots in your corpses? The first thing he did is he pulled out his smartphone and showed me a photo of one that he had just removed in May the previous month out of a corpse. So he was definitely seeing them himself. I also had funeral directors and embalmers coming up to me and saying, hey, I'm really excited to come to your presentation tomorrow. In fact, I just don't want to come. My wife wants to come to this thing too. In fact, one of the wives actually works at a Tennessee hospital, and she was all excited because she's seen some strange things happen in her hospital. She was very interested in what I was going to be saying the following day as well. There was one gentleman, an older gentleman, that when I came up, I said, how about you? Are you seeing the white fibrous clots in your corpses? He said, you mean the chicken fat clots? I said, no. The chicken fat clots, as we know, they've been around forever. And they're much smaller, they're yellowish in color, and they tear very easily. Much, much different than these large white fibrous clots that can be very tough and rubbery. It can be hard to break. So what was interesting about that is that gentleman, after I gave my presentation the next day on Sunday, he came up to me and said, I am so glad you came and talked to us about this. So he was admitting that basically they are two different things, the chicken fat clots and these white fibrous clots, from the physical evidence I showed him, the slides, and what we talked about during the presentation. So,
But I guess he was one of those who hadn't seen them ever.
yeah, he was a doubter. He thought we were talking about chicken fat clots, and we set him straight during the actually, showing him the samples I had, and then talking the next day at the presentation that these indeed are different two types of clots.
Right. But I mean, if you showed him your vial, I mean, you look at that as an embalmer, you know immediately that this is not a chicken fat clot. So his answer didn't make much sense.
I know, but some people it takes a little more convincing than others. But
interesting. So when you went to this reception in the evening, how many people already recognized you or knew about you?
Not that many. And that's one of the odd things about this. In fact, we asked a question about that in our worldwide survey this last year. We asked how many of you are watching online videos, have watched the Died Suddenly film, have watched interviews like you and I are doing right now. And very few of them, only about a third had watched, information concerning the white fibrous clots. 2/3 had not, which is surprising to me because like I said, my latest worldwide survey, 83% of the embalmers said they were seeing these white fibrous clots. So it's bizarre that seems to be this lack of curiosity. But that's what made it so great that the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association invited me to speak at this meeting, because it's an acknowledgement by their organization that, yes, we're into year 4 of this thing now. We've never seen these things before. It's time that we start talking about them. So I'm actually hoping that it opens the door, and other funeral director associations in other states around the country will do the same. They'll invite me to come speak to their embalmers and funeral directors, and we'll start to get this more out in the open and admit that it's actually happening. As
Yes.
you know, one of the reasons we suspect that they've been reluctant to talk about it is, as you know, a lot of funeral directors actually mandated that their employees take the COVID-19 vaccine back in 2021. So there might be a reluctance on these funeral directors to want to participate in a survey that might actually show a link between the COVID vaccines and these unusual clots. You know, especially if one of their employees gets injured, you could be setting yourself up for a liability suit. So, but like I said, you know, I think now that's being overcome by the fact that they realize this problem's not going away, it's persisting. So now, you know, it's safer to talk about it.
So when you showed up there at this funeral directors convention, was there anyone who was kind of hostile to you?
No, they were the sweetest people in the world, and you know, I think they have to be that nature, because remember what their profession is. They're preparing bodies for funeral, for viewings, and they're trying to comfort families who are grieving over the loss of a loved one. So they take care in preparing the bodies and you know, making sure that everything is right. In fact, a couple of the briefings that were on the same day as mine, I was just one of the guest speakers there. One of the speakers talked about how the customer is always right. So when the funeral is happening, you try to make sure that you grant all the requests of the mourning family, so that they, you know, everything goes properly during the service. There was another briefing by a gentleman said maybe you can add some humor into the service, because sometimes that helps the grieving family cope better. If you tell funny stories about the deceased, then that can help us to cope with the loss of that loved one and make things easier. But like I said, my briefing, though, is a totally different type of briefing, obviously, about these white fibrous clots. It was a very serious briefing about this unusual phenomenon that we think is killing a lot of people, right? Causing strokes and heart attacks.
Right. Yeah, not much humor in that. You know, I'm wondering to how many funeral associations you are going to speak, maybe later this year or next year, because I remember from our interview half a year ago that you said that when you sent out your request with the survey request, you sent it to the funeral director associations in this country. And I think every state here has one, right? And a lot of them were not willing to forward it to their members.
Yeah. In fact, in my latest 2024 worldwide survey that we did last November and December, I sent it out to, every year I've sent it out to the 30 top U.S. state funeral director associations by population. I figured that would catch most of the country. And that includes a lot of blue states and red states, right? You know, blue states like California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, red states like Ohio, Texas, Florida. They're in the top, 30 states population wise. And as usual, I've never mentioned the words COVID or vaccine in the surveys whatsoever, but in last year when I sent that survey out, really only 6 states of the 30 that I sent it to, their state of funeral director associations really encouraged their people to take the survey. And I could tell that because the first question I asked in my survey is, where are you located in the United States, for example. So, and those states were, I think, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Florida, I think. Those are the ones that responded the best. Yeah.
And Pennsylvania had dropped out.
So there were 24 others that didn't respond well. And that was the really bizarre thing. My best performer from the previous year, from my 2023 survey, Pennsylvania, their state funeral director association did exactly as I asked. They forwarded my survey to their membership because in the 2 days after they did that, I received 125 responses in just those 2 days from embalmers across the state of Pennsylvania. This last year in 2024, they refused to take the survey, despite the fact that their president sent me an email in November of 2024 saying that he was having a difficult time getting the formaldehyde, the fluid, from the elbows down into the hands. So he was having clotting problems in almost all of his corpses, he said. He was having so despite the fact he was having problems himself, their board elected not to participate in the survey, which again tells me that something strange is going on here, some kind of cover up, because we know this is happening. We have physical proof of it. We have other embalmers, 300 embalmers, 250 of them said they're seeing the clots. But there's still this reluctance by a lot of these associations to want to talk about it.
Yeah, so there must have been blowback against, against him, or some sort of veiled threat or something to don't do that again. That was the last time you forwarded Tom Haviland's email to the embalmers in the state of Pennsylvania. So you said
By the way, Wallace Hooker, like who I mentioned earlier, was in the Died Suddenly film. He lectures in states all around the Midwest, and he recently was a guest lecturer at the Pennsylvania Funeral Director Association annual convention. Guess what he didn't talk about? He didn't talk about the white fibrous clots.
Oh, come on. What did he talk about? Chicken fat clots? What did he talk about?
Other things that deal with embalming techniques maybe they're using, for injection site points, putting the formaldehyde in and out. I don't know. But I just know that one of the things that was off limits for him to talk about was the white fibrous clots when he went there. Sad, isn't it?
Wow.
Because remember, if embalmers and funeral directors, as well as doctors, vascular surgeons, cath lab workers, if they don't let us know what's going on inside people's veins and arteries, then we, the American public, don't know. They're the only ones that see what's going on inside veins and arteries.
So maybe we should show the clip where you are seen. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to show the clip, and then you can also tell us what was happening there.
Go ahead and play it. We'll see how well the audio is.
Okay, good.
Himself. Taylor is the only funeral director president that has invited me to come speak to his audience. I've been in touch with the other funeral director associations in the other states in the United States via email. We've communicated about my surveys that I've been doing.
I'm talking about the fact that Taylor Moore is the only president of a funeral director association that has invited me to speak. Of course,
we're talking about a very serious issue today, and these are these very unusual blood clots that embalmers with 20 and 30 years of experience had never seen before until the last 4 or 5 years. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to discuss the results of the latest survey that I ran with help of my assistant, Ms. Laura Kasner. She's my survey monkey expert, and we've done these surveys the last 3 years in Survey Monkey. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about what's driving clots, how are they forming, why are they forming. So, next slide, Laura. This is another view this is one of the typical clots that the embalmers will see. It almost looks like a capture of that particular part of the vascular system. You can see like the main trunk and then tributaries running off the clots. It's very unusual. It's like a cast of that portion of the vascular system. Next slide. Here's another up close. Sometimes they're more gelatinous, sometimes they're more dry and rubbery. The embalmers I talk to say that they look like calamari, and then they stretch like a rubber band. They're actually hard to break. You have to pull apart with a little bit of tension. So there definitely is something different than what embalmers have typically seen in the past. The grape jelly clots are what embalmers have typically seen in the past. And then there's also chicken fat clots, which are yellowish in color, smaller, they tear very easily. Much different than these large white fibrous clots that are really tough and rubbery, like I say, even hard to break. I have a couple of samples here with me too live. This was given to me by embalmer Richard Hirschman, who's featured in the Died Suddenly movie. And I have a larger sample here. This is about a 5.5-inch clot. And it's about 1/2 inch thick. This was actually taken out of the abdominal aorta, which is one of the largest blood vessels in the body. And actually, this one was removed during a cavity embalming using a trocar. The embalmer got a hold of it at one end, and as he was pulling out his trocar, he saw this little piece of this poking out of the deceased, and he went ahead and pulled the rest of it out, and this is what he got. So, I met a lot of you folks last night at the reception. I think you guys get a bad rap because people say, "Oh, people in the funeral industry must be weird. They like to work with the dead." But you people are the most caring, loving people that I've ever met, because you have to be in this profession. The way that you take care of the deceased and prepare the bodies for viewing, knowing that's going to be the last time your loved one will see that person, and then the compassion that you show, It's remarkable. You folks are remarkable people. I love you already. So, in fact, embalmers, can I get a show of hands in the room? How many folks in here are actually doing active embalming right now? Raise your hands, leave your hands up, okay? Of those people, leave them up. Of those people that have doing active embalming, if you're seeing these white fibrous clots over the last few years, keep your hand up. If you're not seeing them, please put your hand down. Okay? It looks like there's still quite a few hands up in the room. That's interesting. Look around, folks, if you're a fellow embalmer. You can see how many hands are up. Okay, keep your hands up now. People that are other people in the funeral home, funeral directors who don't embalm, other staff, how many of you have seen the white fibrous clots as well? I know you wander into the, okay? So, a lot of hands up there. Okay, that's good.
Okay, that's it, Cornelia.
All right.
Video proof that from these, official proof from these Tennessee embalmers that they are indeed seeing the white fibrous clots. You saw most of the hands stayed up in the room, didn't they? About 2/3 of them stayed up. Only about 1/3 of them went down when I said, put your hands down if you're not seeing the clots.
Yes, and it was
that was
also
verified in the survey that we will go through here in a minute.
Yeah, and the audience, I mean, they were very quiet. They were quietly raising their hands and quietly putting their hands on. Nobody said anything, nothing. You said during your presentation that we just saw, you said, oh, I'm going to go into how these blood clots are forming or these white clots are forming. Was there, when you started to talk about that in your presentation, was there some sort of engagement with the audience? Were there questions? Did they contribute something? What was it like?
After I finished with my speech, we did get some questions. I think some of them recognized the seriousness of the issue, because, like I said, they've been seeing these, and I think they've been seeing them in quite a few of their corpses. So they're worried too, right? Most of these embalmers have 20 or 30 years of experience. I think the average was about 15 years of experience. That's what we got out of our 2023 survey. And by gauging the age of the people in the room, I would say this is probably a typical group with about an average of 15 years of experience. So they didn't know what the blood looked like prior to COVID and the vaccines, and they never saw these before. So they're concerned too, and they've been seeing younger people wind up on their tables the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a very sad situation, not just from these blood clots, but from turbo cancers, and other issues too that cause death. So, in fact, one of the embalmers at the very end, when I was talking about the fact that there's a possibility that the white fibrous clots and the blood surrounding them could be prionic in nature. Prion could be infectious amyloids that actually contaminate or infect perfectly healthy proteins around them. Then one of the embalmers he asked the question, is it too late already? As if, so much of this has been released into the environment. Is it too late to stop this contagion from catching on? So I think they realize and recognize the seriousness of this and the significance of it. Now, since that time, Dr. Kevin McCarran is a neuroscientist over in Japan. Kevin is still doing continuing testing, and we're not sure whether or not the amyloid material is prionic in nature or not. We think it is within the bloodstream itself, but there's still some questions about whether it could be outside the bloodstream in the open environment. It could be contagious or not. So the verdict is still out on that. So I don't want to lead the audience down the wrong path, but there is a possibility that potentially could happen.
Yeah. I'm still struck by how quiet it was. You had that huge picture up there, right, with these enormous white clots. I mean, that's a pretty scary picture. If you see a picture like that for the first time, I would expect some gasps or some, my God, what is that? Or something from the audience. I wouldn't expect some sort of movement and, just how you react with your body to some horrific.
Well, I think
there was nothing that, so I think they probably all knew exactly what you were talking about. They had heard about it. It wasn't new to anyone probably, or what do you think?
It could be that, or they could just be riveted there and, just intently listening because they want to know how prevalent this is themselves. Because if they haven't been paying attention, they haven't been looking online, they may not know the numbers like we do, like, the fact they're popping up in 27% of corpses, or the fact that microclotting is a problem as well, or, all these other issues associated with it, or the fact that, they know that associations have been staying quiet about it. That's for sure. So, and this is the first time, like I said, they've acknowledged something is going on.
Yeah.
I think they were really interested to know how they were forming. So at the end of my presentation, I went through the work that Greg Harrison and his team have done, all those tests they have done, like the ICP-MS analysis, the amino acids test, the HPLC analysis, high performance liquid chromatography analysis, the RT quick testing that McCarran's gone through. I took them through each of those tests to prove that there is something going on in the way that the spike protein, either from the virus or the vaccine, is combining with our natural blood clotting protein fibrinogen to alter it and change it, from converting into normal fibrin to now converting into this very rubbery polymer instead, these white rubbery clots. So I think by the end of the presentation, they were pretty well convinced that yes, indeed, there is something going on here, because they saw the physical proof eyeballed. They also saw, I showed them the slides of the scanning electron microscope images that McCarran's taken from a small micrometer slice of the one of Richard Hirschman's Embalmer clots, and shows that the fibrinogen's all twisted, the fibrin's all twisted. It's got all these nasty nodules on it. It becomes very difficult to break down. Much different than the way that fibrin's supposed to look, like smooth spaghetti noodles, in normal conversion to fibrin. So
Yes.
yeah.
And you just mentioned that potentially there's a prionic nature of these white fibrous clots, prionic seeding. So prions are very dangerous. They are very infectious, and they cause terrible degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, Parkinson's. So
dementia.
Was there concern among the embalmers about the risk that they might be taking, and about the importance of covering, protecting themselves, always wearing gloves, never touching them with their bare hands?
I told them at the end of that presentation, be careful in handling the clots, not just handling the clots, but also cleaning your instruments too, your forceps and things like that, because they can become infected as well if these things are indeed prionic in nature. So, like I said, it wasn't a fun presentation to give. It was a serious presentation, and you're right, the room was dead silent because they were all listening very intently to what was being said. So they knew that it affects them directly.
How about we have a look at your slides? You
Yeah.
already mentioned just briefly, to go a little bit more into that, because there were also some other numbers from your survey.
Yeah, we asked a couple of new questions this time that are kind of fun. I think I'll incorporate those into my 2024 worldwide survey as well. There we go.
All right, that's the one.
I actually had a big box with a slit in the top, and I handed out paper surveys to all the embalmers and funeral directors in the room to have them take this paper survey the same day that I gave the speech. And I didn't know until that night, after I got back, after making the speech, that night I opened the box up and I counted the number of people that participated, and it turned out to be 28 people that participated in the survey. Go ahead and go to the next slide, and you'll see the breakdown.
Tom, you said earlier that there were 28 embalmers present, so all of them took the survey.
I believe so. That's the number that I counted in the box. So I put a piece of paper out in front of everybody. So hopefully everybody took it. I can't say that everybody did, but I know that 28 did, because I had 28 pieces of paper in the box at the end of the day. Of those, 3 of them were funeral directors only. They do not do any embalming. 3 of them were active embalmers only. They don't do any funeral directing. But 22 of them do both. They're actually funeral directors and active embalmers. And this wasn't too much of a surprise to me, because Richard Hirschman told me that when funeral directors and embalmers go for their mortuary degrees to mortuary school, there's a lot of overlapping classes. So they usually pick up both degrees. So they're able to do both funeral directing and embalming. Richard, for example, he is a funeral director. He's got a funeral director's license, but he doesn't do any funeral directing at all. He's purely a trade embalmer now. So he's gone to the embalming side only. But so the good news here is, though, that out of the 28 of them, 25, right, the 22 plus the 3, actually are doing active embalming. And then there's 3 others that are funeral directors that they probably sneak into the embalming room from time to time to see what's going on, right? So they know about the clots too. So next
Yes,
slide.
and you had a couple of people in your clip who raised their hands afterwards, not active embalmers, but you had seen the clots as well.
Seen the clots, right. So they probably wandered back in the embalming room during embalming, or maybe the embalmer called them back and said, hey boss, look what I found in this corpse while I was doing my embalming. So the next question, of course, is we asked, have you seen the white fibrous structures clots in the veins and or arteries of your corpses during the first half of 2025? Like I said, these Tennessee embalmers are kind of our canaries in the coal mine, right? They're letting us, giving us our first look at what's happening in 2025. Unfortunately, majority are still seeing them. 18 of the 28 said they're seeing the white fibrous clots in their corpses. So 64%, down from my worldwide survey of 83%. Like I said, this is a smaller sample size, but still quite alarming that, so many years into this, they're still seeing this phenomenon they've never seen before. Years of COVID or vaccines. Next slide. So then the next natural question is, okay, what percentage of your corpses have you seen the white fibrous structures clots in? And if you average all the bars together, Cornelia, you get an average of 17% of corpses in the first half of 2025 containing the clots. And as I said before, the embalmers, they saw this in no corpses prior to COVID or the vaccines. You can't find these things in old pathology books. John Campbell has about 6 or 7 pathology books. He looked in all of them, couldn't see it in any of them. He saw plenty of grape jelly clots and chicken fat clots, but no white fibrous clots. Next slide.
Yeah, interesting. So you have quite a variation here. So 12 of them saw it in 1% to 20% of corpses.
Correct.
And they are, of course, just guessing,
right.
Trying to guess.
Unless Richard keeps tabs. He actually has a database he keeps on his computer, and he has a color-coded system where he keeps track of which corpses contain clots and which ones do not. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any access or much access to COVID vaccination records of the corpses, so he cannot link it to the vaccine potential to the white fibrous clot. That's an area that doctors do have access to those records, right? Unlike the embalmers. Once in a while, the family of the deceased will volunteer to the funeral director or the embalmer the COVID vaccination status of their loved one, but it's rare. It doesn't happen very often.
Oh, I have a question. Did you ask the funeral director of the Tennessee Funeral Director Association whether funeral houses usually keep records of embalmings? So, for example, would there be some sort of recording of the fact that an embalmer found these white clots? I doubt it, but
yeah, probably not, Cornelia, because the clots just go down the drain. They go in the wastebasket or down the drain. They don't keep them.
So
all their job is to get the blood out and the formaldehyde in to try to make the corpse look as good as possible for viewing. They'll spend a lot of time preparing the head, a lot of times the hands as well. So they want to make sure they get fluid to the head and the hands.
I have an idea. Why don't you you now know the head of this Funeral Director Association in Tennessee, right?
Well, actually, he is no longer the president. The weekend that we were there, that convention, they were electing a new board and a new president. So he was on the way out as he was asking me to, and that might have been the reason I got invited.
That's interesting. He was on the way out.
Yeah.
So there was no political risk for him to invite you.
Exactly, because he knew. What are they going to do if they don't like the fact that that I came and talked to their embalmers? Are they going to fire him on his last day that he's president? So I think maybe that's what happened here. I think maybe a man like Taylor Moore with a good conscience said, "Hey, I have an opportunity here to expose this to the world, and there's little risk to me because it's on the last day that I'm going to be president, and I'm stepping down the next day anyways."
Wow, no, that's a very interesting little detail. So you have to ask Taylor Moore. Maybe he knows which of the directors of funeral associations in other states are going to are in their last term. I don't know how often they are elected, and it might be different from state to state. But you have to target those that are on their that are
On the
going to
way
be
out.
replaced
Yeah.
that are on their way out. Yes, exactly. Because you have a better chance of talking to them. So that is very, very interesting. He was on his way out. So, if I were a funeral director, you know what I would tell my embalmers? I would tell them that from now on they have to meticulously document how many, if they found white structures in a body, and how many, the size, the location. It's going to be extra work, but I would build up a database for my funeral home, and would encourage other people to do the same.
And I think in a couple of my worldwide survey responses, the comment sections at the end, just November, December, I think there were one or two embalmers that said they were doing just that. They were starting to track personally when they saw the white clots in corpses, and doing something similar to what Richard Hirschman's doing, but very, very, very few. Probably not enough, to have a significant sample size. But so the next question we asked, this is a new one. I asked, what is the longest white fibrous structure clot that you've seen removed from a corpse in 2025? 5 of the embalmers and funeral directors said none, because they hadn't seen any. 9 said a white fibrous clot between 1 to 2 inches long. 7 said a clot between 3 to 5 inches long. 5 of the embalmers said a white fibrous clot between 6 to 12 inches long. And there was even one, Cornelia, who said removed a clot that was more than 12 inches long. And that's, like I said, that's not a shock to us, because, Richard Hirschman's got a 19-inch one in a tube. And we know there's others that have been taken out over 2 feet long, these white fibrous clots. They can get huge. So,
Tom, do you know the uptake of the 2 basic first mRNA COVID shots in Tennessee?
No, it's a red state, and red states averaged around 65 to 70% of adults over the age of 18 taking the first couple of COVID shots. Blue states averaged around 90% of the adults over the age of 18 taking the first 2 jabs. The average for the whole country is about 80%, according to the CDC. About 80% of adults over the age of 18 took at least the first 2 jabs back in 2021. But then, as you know, the next year, only about 20% took the BA4, BA5 bivalent Omicron booster. And then the following year, in 2023, only about 10 to 15% took the XBB 1.5 booster in the fall of 2023. And now this year, I think they're going to come out with another one based on the JN1 variant of the virus. And I'm expecting probably a 5 to 10% uptake. So it's been steadily declining, and the CDC's been, talking about that over the last few years. They're remorsing over it. I'm ecstatic over the fact that Americans have figured it out and stopped taking the shots, because we know they're not stopping you from catching COVID or transmitting it to others. And people are finally starting to understand now. They probably have somebody in their own lives who they know has been either injured or killed by the jabs. So Americans aren't dumb. They figure it out after a little while.
Yeah, this is interesting. So Tennessee is a red state. The uptake was considerably below, according to what you said, like 65.
So that might have been they found the white fibrous clots in a less percentage of the corpses, right? Maybe they found it, like I said, in 17% of the corpses, because a lower percentage of Tennesseans have taken the vaccine compared to Californians or people from Illinois or Massachusetts. So I thought about that too, Cornelia. That's a good explanation.
Yeah.
Next
but
question.
Richard Hirschman, the embalmer Richard Hirschman, he works in Alabama. And Alabama is a red state.
Yes.
And he finds the white fibrous clots in, it depends, between, if I remember correctly, 39 and 70%.
Yeah,
so an average something like 50%.
Right. Yeah, he's still finding it in a high percentage of corpses. So I guess it goes against it because it is a red state. Another thing to consider, by the way, too, is the percentage of corpses that are embalmed versus cremated. I know there's states like in Alabama where Richard's from, for example. I think it's about 70% are actually embalmed for a funeral and buried, whereas only 30% are cremated. In states like Nevada, it's the exact opposite. About 70% of people are cremated, and only about 30% are embalmed and buried. So that also plays a factor as well in terms of how many white fibrous clots you're going to find, depending on whether you get, burials versus cremations.
True. And we also have, I mean, I have no idea whether people who want to be embalmed are maybe less likely to have taken the shots. I don't know. There's so many things we don't know.
I think we're splitting hairs too much there. It's hard to figure that out. And we certainly didn't have enough responses to know that. So the next question we had is also, I think, a new question. I asked, has a family member of the deceased ever asked you to look for the white fibrous structures clots in their loved one, or asked if you found the white fibrous clots structures in their loved one in 2025 or any year prior? Of the 28 funeral directors and embalmers that responded from Tennessee, only one of them, Cornelia, said that anybody's ever asked them, a family member of the deceased has ever asked them that question, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I could think of a couple of reasons why. First of all, they may not know about the white fibrous clots. They might know about them, but they might be too embarrassed to ask about the embalmer to look for them. Also, there may be nothing unusual about the death. So there's nothing suspicious going on. There's an older person who died and they knew the person was in ill health for many years. But then I think there's the subset of people that might be in denial. Maybe they know about the white fibrous clots and they know their loved one took the vaccine. And that person, may even been a young person who died of a stroke or heart attack unexpectedly. And if that person, they may not want to know about that, especially if they encouraged their loved one to take the COVID-19 vaccine. You may not want to know the answer to that question, because then you'd feel guilt about, oh my goodness, I encouraged my loved one to take the vaccine and then they had a stroke or heart attack at the age of 42,
Yes, that's definitely true. And of course, another reason might be that people just don't know about the white blood clots.
Right. Yeah, they just don't know about them. And that's what we're trying to get out. We're trying to get the message out about the clots. Next slide.
Mm-hmm. So you probably asked this question also to get some sort of an idea first of all, how many people might know about it, and then how many people are actually so concerned about it that they are willing to ask this question.
And so it's you can see by the response there, it's very, very few right now. Very, very few family members are either know about or willing to ask that question of the embalmer. So then we asked, of course, about the microclotting phenomenon, because, this is just as dangerous as these large white fibrous clots that we know are causing strokes and heart attacks. Microclotting, as we've talked about before, occurs at the capillary level in very small blood vessels, and can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs and then carrying that oxygen to all the major organs in your body, like your brain, your eyes. So we asked the embalmers, are you seeing this, which they describe as coffee grounds or dirty blood? And 19 of the embalmers, 70%, said, yep, still seeing the microclotting. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see what percentage of corpses.
I have a question about this. So we know from Dr. Risa Pretorius' research, she's a researcher in South Africa, and she has researched microclotting for many years, pre-COVID. And she has confirmed recently that the microclotting eventually leads to the formation of these macroclots, these white fibrous large structures that can be like a foot long and even longer than that. So when they see evidence of microclotting in the blood, then that means that the people, if they hadn't died, would have eventually, in all likelihood, developed macroclots. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, Risa Pretorius a couple of weeks ago actually visited the United States. She visited Dr. Jordan Vaughn's long COVID, long vax clinic in Birmingham, Alabama. And Richard Hirschman drove up there with some samples of the white fibrous clots. And so met Dr. Pretorius, and so it was the first time she'd ever seen the clots live in person. So it was
that's interesting. Yeah. So he drove and talked to her and met with her and showed her the clots. It was the first time she actually saw the white fibrous clots.
Correct, because she's been dealing with the microclot issue for the last 4 or 5 years. So it was her first chance to see one of these huge embalmers clots.
Well, that must have been super interesting for her to see that, and
It
also for
was.
Hirschman, because both you and Richard Hirschman, you have developed into quite some experts of macro clots and the chemical
Well,
analysis and how
that's
they
thanks,
form.
thanks to Greg Harrison and Kevin McCarran. They're the ones that are leading the science behind it. So we try to keep up with them.
Well,
They do a great
yeah,
job of explaining it to us, and they put it into layman's terms, which makes it easy for Richard and I then to talk about it.
yes, yeah, exactly. So, and I interviewed Greg and you together, which is an interview I published a couple of months ago. That interview was really popular, by the way. A lot of people
Oh,
watched
good,
it.
good.
Yes. Yeah. Very happy
It's an
about that.
important one because, more people need to understand. I wish the CDC and the FDA would watch it, because then they would get an idea of how these clots are forming. They can conduct the same kind of test that Greg and his team and Kevin McCarran have been doing, and either confirm or refute the findings that these gentlemen have come up with.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's a shame it's not happening, but we'll keep putting the information out there, and hopefully someday they'll be shamed into actually doing it.
Another question I have about the slide is the following. So 17%, I think you said 17% of the embalmers said they have seen microclotting, and also 17% said that they have seen macroclotting. Correct?
Yeah, if you go to the next slide.
Right. But so my question now is this. What was the overlap? I mean, so because if you have 17 embalmers who saw the microclotting only in corpses that didn't have any macroclotting, and the other embalmers, the 17%, and the embalmers who saw it in 70% of their bodies, they saw that the macroclotting, but didn't see any microclotting, then that would suggest that there are actually more people who have clots. Or how does it overlap? Or is it that the people who saw microclotting also saw?
Richard,
yes.
Yeah, Richard.
I would think so.
Richard does so many bodies. He does well over 300 bodies per year. Richard is a prolific embalmer. So he's a good one to go off of on this. And he says, he'll see bodies with just the white fibrous clots. He'll see some with just the microclotting, but then he'll see bodies with both. And it's probably about a third is my guess, from the way that Richard and I have talked about this in the past. One of the things that Richard likes to say is prior to COVID, he would only see unusual blood in about 10 to 15% of his corpses at the most, and about 85% of his corpses, 85 to 90% of corpses had what he called normal blood. Now, since COVID and the vaccines have come out, he says that ratio is flipped for him. Now, only about 10 to 15% of corpses have what he was considered normal blood. The other 85 to 90% have abnormal blood. So that tells me that there's a lot of bodies out there with either the white fibrous clots, the microclotting, or both in them. It's a shocking number, Cornelia. It's shocking.
Yes. Yeah, and you didn't even ask them about normal blood clots, like the jelly, the red
clots,
jelly.
not this time. In previous surveys, we've determined that since the years of COVID and the vaccines, the grape jelly clots have gone up about 33%.
Right.
They used to be seen in about 30% of corpses. Now they're seen in about 40% of corpses. And in addition to being seen in a larger percentage of corpses, they're also more like grape jam now than grape jelly. They've gotten thicker over the years. So that's not a good sign either. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have really three clotting issues. We have the traditional blood clots, the real blood clots, like the red jelly
clots. Yep.
The grape jelly blood clots, and the incidence of those has skyrocketed to 40% from something
from 30, from 30% up to 40%.
So I see. Okay. So it has increased somewhat from 30% to 40%. I thought it was lower. Okay. So we have that issue. Then we have the microclotting issue, which
has gone from less than 5% of corpses prior to COVID and the vaccines to now about 17% of corpses.
Okay. So that's a significant
in this Tennessee
increase.
survey. In my worldwide survey, it was about 22% of corpses.
Yes.
So
okay.
It's at least a tripling or quadrupling of that phenomenon for microclotting since COVID and the vaccines.
And then we have
of course, these white fibrous clots, it's a brand new phenomenon, right? They never saw this prior to COVID or the vaccines.
Well, except for the heparin incidents in the
Correct.
when was that, 1980s?
The late 1980s, early 1990s. Yeah, what you're talking about there was the drug heparin, an anticoagulant, was causing in some people what they actually called white clot syndrome. And they determined that the strength of the heparin was too much. The one ingredient in the heparin that was the culprit was sulfur. Sulfur was causing these white clots to form in some people. They actually, like I said, eliminated that problem by lowering the strength of the heparin. And what's interesting is we believe this phenomenon is now being driven by phosphorus as well as sulfur as well. Sulfur's in the vaccines as well. But sulfur and phosphorus happen to sit right side by side on the periodic table. They have many of the same bonding properties. And actually, phosphorus outcompetes sulfur in terms of its number of valence electrons. So it actually, the phospholipid nanoparticles we believe are involved in the formation of these clots, as well as the spike protein, which is becoming phosphorylated.
Yeah, exactly. And when Greg Harrison's small international team analyzed these white fibrous clots, they found a huge percentage of phosphorus in these analoids.
Yeah, the typical phosphorus, I think, prior to the COVID and the vaccines in a normal human body is, I want to say it's about anywhere between 100 to 1,000 parts per million. In the white fibrous clots, they found it in 5,000 parts per million. So anywhere between a 10 to 50 times as much, phosphorus in the white fibrous clots.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one.
We just asked in microclotting, we asked what percentage of your corpses contained the microclotting. It just turned out to be the same percentage as the white fibrous clots. 17% of the corpses, 1 out of every 6, according to the Tennessee Embalmers. Again, like I said, prior to COVID, they saw this in less than 5% of the corpses, typically corpses, people that had heavy chemotherapy. So this is at least a tripling of this phenomenon.
Right. And since there is no total overlap between, microclotting and macroclotting, you would actually have to increase if you take the percentage, you can't do that from the data you have, but I would imagine it is higher than 17%, because there will have been some bodies where they only found microclotting and no macroclotting.
Correct. Yep.
Which is really serious, because the microclots do eventually, over time, as far as we know, they do not dissolve, but they seem to grow and develop into the macroclots.
And they could be just as dangerous on their own, because, like I said, they can block these very small capillaries, where only one corpuscle gets through at a time, and they can block those very small capillaries and cause brain fog, poor vision problems. You have very small blood vessels in your eyes leading up into your brain. So, they could be responsible.
Can they be the cause of death?
Absolutely. If you have a stroke, yeah. To your brain, if you can't get blood to your brain, it can cause a stroke. So then we asked a question we asked back in our 2023 survey. We asked if you had noticed an increase in infant deaths, either at your funeral home or at your local hospital morgue in 2025 compared to the years 2019 and prior. And there was one funeral director embalmer that couldn't answer the question because they were too young. They were not an embalmer back in 2019, or the ones that were, that had been prior to 2019. 11 of them, Cornelia, 39% said that yes, they've seen an increase in infant deaths in 2025 compared to the years 2019 and prior. That's a disturbing result. And as you know, they have found the spike protein in the delivered placentas from the mother. After she delivers the child, she delivers the placenta. They found the spike protein from the vaccine and the delivered placentas. They've also found the spike protein from the vaccine in mother's milk as well. So this is really unfortunate. The spike protein seems to be getting through from the mother into the child.
Did you get any data about the increase in the extent of more infant deaths?
Yeah, next slide.
Okay.
You're right on the money. We always ask that. Not just are you seeing it, but what percentage are you seeing that in? Exactly. And if you average, you see 14 of the embalmers, funeral directors said none, but 11 said between 1 to 20% increase, and 3 of them said between a 21 to 40% increase. So if you average all those together, just the blue bar and the yellow bar, if you do not include the green bar this time, you get an increase of 14% in infant deaths in 2025 compared to the pre-COVID years for just those that saw the increase.
Oh, that's interesting. So
still
here
very
we
alarming, right?
Yeah. So this is interesting. 11 said yes, there was an increase, and 16 said no. But when we go to the next one, we see that 11 said 11 and 3. So it's 14.
Yeah, some of these numbers, and I thought that was kind of, sometimes when they answer these
more.
surveys, the numbers don't add up the way they should. And you're right. They're a little bit off. And I don't know why. It's like the person answered one question one way, but then they answer the next question the other way. It's like, what? Yeah. If you saw an increase, you should have, put down the numerical number of that increase. So.
Yeah, and this is the more detailed question, This is
right.
Here you're drilling down.
I just tell you the results and I go with what I get. I don't try to change
of course,
the answer
as you have
to make
to.
things match. I have to report it as reported by the embalmers. So, but you're right. There are a few places where the math is a little bit off there, but generally speaking, it's pretty close.
21 to 40%, 1 to 20%.
And one of the reasons there's a lot of embalmers that don't see any is a lot of funeral directors and embalmers, they don't handle the infants because their funeral home charges for that service. There are other funeral homes that actually provide that service for free to the grieving parents. They can't see their way to charge a mom and dad who just lost a baby. So obviously the ones that do not charge for their service will get more infants coming their way, right? So one of the reasons that some of the embalmers and funeral directors aren't seeing an increase in infant deaths is because they don't see many infant deaths, period.
Do you have an idea how many of these embalmers do charge and how many do not charge?
I don't know the percentages, but I just heard that some will provide the service for free just out of respect and for grieving parents. And it's so rare too, right? It's not going to cost a funeral home that much money to
do a
funeral for an infant.
Right. Did you also ask them how many of them found these white fibrous clots in these infants?
In infants, no, because the infants are so small, their blood vessels are so small. It's it's hard to really determine that. So we just went with infant deaths, period. But what the embalmers do see a lot of times is when they go to the hospital morgue to pick up adult remains or, teenagers or whatever, they will also come in contact with children who, have been either stillborn at the hospital, miscarriages, those kind of things. And so they'll see, unfortunately, sometimes I think there's a freezer where they keep the dead children, dead babies. And they can tell whether that freezer's filled or whether it's half full or empty, of infants.
Right, right. So how do you embalm infants then?
I don't know how they do this. That's a better question for Richard.
Yes. Yeah, we have to ask Richard about that. Okay, let's go to the next one.
The last question we asked the Tennessee embalmers is, and this is another question we asked back in our 2023 worldwide survey, is what age groups, check all that apply, did you see an increase in the number of clots of any type, whether it be grape jelly, white fibrous or microclotting in 2025 compared to the years 2019 and prior? I guess the good news there, Cornelia, very few answered for any group up to the age of like 35 years old. But then you see a long bar starting there at 36 to 50-year-olds, 9 there, and then 17, the longest bars, 51 to 65-year-olds, then 66 to 80-year-olds, and then it gets short again for over 80-year-olds. That 9, though, for the 36 to 50-year-olds really disturbs me because, usually you don't think of people of that age group having strokes and heart attacks at that age, right? Usually you don't see that until people get into their late 50s, early 60s. And as you know, this really dovetails closely with Edward Dowd's work. He's taking a look at this from a completely different angle, right? Death and disability data in the insurance industry. And Ed saw a tremendous increase in death and disability in that particular age group, 36 to 50-year-olds, starting in the third quarter of 2021, right after the COVID-19 vaccines were mandated. Remember, it wasn't just the military government civilians and us defense contractors that got mandated to take the jabs. Joe Biden tried to make any company that had more than 100 employees take the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, while that was eventually shot down by our Supreme Court, a lot of companies acted preemptively and they made their employees get the shots anyways. And Ed said I think he saw about a 40% spike in death and disability in that age group starting in the third quarter of 2021. And then it continued into the next year, which is very unfortunate, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the embalmers, that's a sad thing when you see a 36 to 50-year-old, winding up on your table with blood clotting issues like that.
Yep. And there's quite a few of them here. Okay.
Yeah. So we asked, again, we always offer the embalmers, they can give us comments. We only got 3 out of the 28 gave us comments, and they're very short. Comment 1 was, we have seen an increase in stillborn deaths. Most are around 19 weeks. I'm not sure why that was occurred. That just seemed to be a trend for that individual. Comment 2 was, saw several white fibrous structures clots in 2023 and 2024, but none this year. So that means that person answered my question about have you seen the clots in the first half of 2025. He was a no on the survey, right? Because he didn't see any this year, but he still has seen them in previous years. So he wasn't one of the 18 that said he had seen the clots this year, back in my question earlier in the survey. But have done less embalming this year than the past few years. Also, we don't get a lot of infants. So he might be in one of those funeral homes where they charge. Comment 3 was, I do not do very many embalmings or burials, so that's why I don't have many young people. So again, when we saw that age stratification slide, that might have been one of the reasons why there weren't many younger people there. And of course, they do, most embalmers, they're usually typically embalming somebody in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, right? But now, unfortunately, they're seeing a lot more 30, 40, and 50-year-olds winding up on their tables.
So this first comment here I find particularly interesting. We have seen an increase in stillborn deaths. Most are around 19 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Most of them are around 19 weeks. Again, since
what that is,
don't know what to make of this. We don't know if the mother was vaccinated shortly before, or because we now know that getting mRNA shots during pregnancy will lead to an increase in stillborn deaths, and in particular around this time. This seems so. I just read that a couple of days ago that around week 20 there has been an observance of more stillbirths when the mothers were vaccinated around that time and during mid-pregnancy.
You're familiar with the study that came out of the Czech Republic, right? The Vivek Maneke and Max Schmeling did, where they saw a 33% decrease in successful conceptions of the women in the Czech Republic who have taken the COVID vaccine compared to the ones that were unvaccinated. And it was a large study of I think 1.2 million women of childbearing ages between like 18 and 39. So it's a large study. And it was just shocking, the tremendous decrease in successful conceptions of those women who've taken the jabs.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's a very interesting study, but it's also a very limited study because it didn't ask. So successful conception, I should say first, means a successful birth of an infant. It doesn't mean that somebody successfully gets pregnant, conceives, but that the woman conceives and then delivers a live baby at some point later. That's the definition of a successful conception. But the Czech study didn't go into or didn't have data about how many of the vaccinated women who showed this dramatic decrease of successful conceptions actually had miscarriages or stillborn deaths. So we don't know, is it, and it's probably a mixture of both, are vaccinated women less fertile because the mRNA, the spike protein and the lipid nanoparticles got into the ovaries and decreased fertility? Or is it that the being vaccinated and having the spike protein in you will cause the developing infant to to die at some point during the pregnancy.
My guess is a combination of both. I know Nick Holscher's.
Yeah,
I
probably.
think he's shown you. You've gone through papers with him, right? He showed you the one that showed all the areas of the body, the major organs that
Yes.
the lipid nanoparticles like to go to, and one of the largest places was the ovaries, right?
That's correct. That's
Well,
correct.
yeah.
And they knew that. Pfizer knew that in 2020.
I know. It's so sinister. I think it's criminal.
Yeah. Oh,
I think it's criminal.
There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's criminal.
By the way, I did submit all that information from the survey, Cornelia, to the FDA, CDC, and NIH to our new regime. It's Bobby Kennedy is the new HHS director. Marty McMachery is the FDA commissioner. Susan Monterez is the CDC director. Jay Bhattacharya is the NIH director. They even sent it to Vinay Prasad, who's in charge of the Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. So I've sent the information to them. I haven't heard anything back from them yet, but I've sent the information to them.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that because you are very good at sending updates and questions and all sorts of information to this whole group of people. Do you ever hear something back?
Once in a while back from some of our individual team members, but not from the ones that are in these political positions. So, in fact, I just sent something to Dr. Robert Malone yesterday. So we'll see what happens there, because he is now part of the ACIP committee, right? So yes. I offered up basically the results of the 3 worldwide surveys that I've done with the embalmers. Also, this latest survey with the Tennessee funeral directors and embalmers. I actually embedded the clip of the embalmers raising their hands. I said, Dr. Malone, actually, he did an interview with Yania Kelly on and Recep Levy, who's also another member of the ACIP committee. So I said, please forward this email to Recep Levy as well, so he understands that this is just one of the side effects, these white fibrous clots, and what's been happening numbers-wise in this area. So, we're pushing as hard as we can, myself, people like Dr. Peter McCullough, Nick Holscher, Pierre Corey, lots of others. We're pushing as hard as we can to try to get these injections removed from the market. We think the evidence is overwhelming that they should be removed, and we just keep peppering even our own friendly administration with this information. Shannon Joy calls it aggressive optimism. And so if we're optimistic, they're going to do something about it. But we want to stay aggressive in making sure that we kind of keep a fire under them so they will do something about it.
Yeah, exactly. Holding their feet to the fire. And it's really important because I see it as kind of support for them, to not, because I know, it's not, they have done some good stuff, but there's also some many things that they haven't done. And the most important things, like pulling the mRNA shots, they haven't done at all. So it's important to keep
because tomorrow morning a mom
building
can
this
walk
fire
into a
under
Walgreens or a CVS pharmacy or a doctor's office, and she can give herself a COVID-19 vaccine and one to her 6-month-old or 4-year-old child. Tomorrow she can get a COVID shot.
Exactly. And you mentioned the ACIP. So the ACIP is the Advisory Committee for Immunizations. It's this panel that advises the CDC on the immunization schedule, which vaccines should be recommended and should be on the childhood schedule. And Robert Kennedy just fired a couple of weeks ago all 17 members of the old ACIP board. Yeah, good for him. Well done. And then he reduced the board to just 7 members, and now there are 7 new members on this ACIP board, and they just had their first meeting. Okay, correct. So but let's have a quick look at this. So I looked at the Department of Health in Tennessee, and they have death statistics there. And if you scroll down, you can see here leading causes of death by sex and age group, and they have leading causes of death, infant deaths aged less than 1 year old. So it doesn't include stillbirths. It's less than less than a year old. But when you look at the years, that you only see 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. That's
Yeah,
all you
where's
got.
2022, 2023, and 2020? Why don't they want to report 2022 through 2024?
That's a good question. I mean, I would expect, it's now 4 years later, I would expect to see at least until 2023, if not
suspect
2024.
the numbers are so bad, Cornelia, that they've been told not to report them. I
Well,
see
I
this
looked-
over
I
and over
looked-
again in county coroner reports. I've looked at my own. I live in Greene County, Ohio. I've checked their coroner reports. I've looked in other counties that have large cities like Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. And it's strange that a lot of these coroners, their reports cut off in the year 2021. They don't want to report what happened in 2022, 2023, 2024 as the numbers start to get bad.
Yes, and I also would have liked to see it going further back. I mean, 2019, that's all you got. There's nothing 2018, 17, 16,
Right.
15, nothing. So I looked at these three, and the numbers there were kind of inconclusive. So
You didn't see a lot more deaths in 2021. Well, here's the thing to think about.
No, I did not, and I think it's
Well,
too early because a child that is maybe between 0 and 12 months old in 2021, that mother probably didn't get the shot because she was pregnant in 2020.
In fact, even if she got the shot in 2021, remember the younger people didn't get the shots until the middle of the year because it was given to healthcare workers and the elderly first. It wasn't offered to 20 somethings until mid year. And remember, so then once she gets the shot, let's say she got it in July of 2021, it's 9 months until she has the birth, right? So yeah, so the pregnancy may not have gone bad until 2022.
That was one of the things that shocked me. I mean, everything was shocking, but that shocked me more than other shocking things, namely that the mRNA shots were recommended to pregnant women almost immediately. I mean, they didn't lose much time before they said, "Oh, it's all good. Pregnant women can take the shot as well."
And I think some medical associations are suing Robert Kennedy to have the shots put back on the schedule for healthy pregnant women.
Correct.
It's bizarre what's going on because they said he got rid of them the wrong way. Instead of going through the ACIP committee and the Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, he usurped their authority by just directly saying, "I want these things off the shelves for healthy pregnant women and healthy children." And even then, they didn't obey his command, Cornelia. If you go to the CDC's website today and look at the child immunization schedule, you'll see when you get to COVID-19 vaccine for children, it'll say see notes. And when you go to see notes, it has all this confusing, long number of words that talk about shared responsibility between the parent and the doctor. And it's still and then it starts talking about all the shots and when they recommend it at certain times. It doesn't just flat out say CDC does not recommend the COVID-19 vaccine for healthy children, which is what it should say. It should say one sentence, but it doesn't. Yeah, let's go there, see what it says today on July 8th, 2025.
Here.
Should be COVID vaccine maybe for children vaccine schedule. Childhood vaccine. Yeah, there it is. Childhood vaccine schedule is down there.
Let's have a look at that. So see, it's not unclear to me what this means. Yeah. Parents, caregivers should talk to their healthcare provider to decide if this vaccine is right for their child. Oh, I think it's here. I think this is the one.
So instead of saying it's not recommended, because Robert F. Kennedy said a month ago, it's not recommended for healthy children. And that's the way he wanted them to list it in their CDC website. So they're disobeying him. Yeah.
That's correct. Oh, because it's really quite something when you scroll through this. It's pages upon pages upon pages of notes. It's a gigantic word salad. And at the end of it, you are completely confused.
I think you counted it. Didn't you send me an email that said it was like over 1,700 words or something like that?
It was a huge number of words. Yes, I counted the words. Mm-hmm.
So it leaves a parent more confused than ever. So then what's she going to do? She's going to default to what the doctor says. And what's the doctor going to say? He's going to recommend the shot. And he's going to put $250 in his pocket for giving that kid the shot.
So this one here is interesting. This is from Edward Dowd's website. where he tracks the excess deaths for various countries. So this is for the United States, and he has different methods of computing mortality. So 3 different ones. Method 1, 5-year death average. Method 2A, 2019 death rate, and then method 2C, which is a trend-adjusted death rate. And I'm here in the 2019 death rate. You can there are some differences according to, for example, you can see what a difference this makes switching to the 5-year death average. But no matter which method you use, they all show a decrease in excess deaths over time. So the light blue is excess deaths in 2020, and then the dark blue is 2021, the green is 2022, and then orange is 2023. That's the last day that he has data for. And when you go to 0 to 24, you see the same development as in all the other age groups. Namely, in 2020, it was low. It was quite a bit lower compared to, a lot lower compared to 2021, where you have this enormous jump. And then it goes down from 2021 to 2022. It goes down, then goes further down from 2022 to 2023.
You can tell by that dark blue bar, something happened in 2021, right? That's when the COVID-19 vaccines came out. And
exactly.
the vaccines worked like they're supposed to. We should have seen a shorter bar than 2020, right? It should have saved lives.
Yes.
But it should have been shorter than that light blue bar, the 2020 bar. So, and plus, remember in 2020, a lot of those older people, those deaths were pulled forward too, right? So somebody that would have died maybe in 2021 or 2022, they died in 2020 instead because they got COVID and they died of COVID. So that's another reason why the bars in excess deaths should have been much lower in 2021 and 2022 than they were in 2020, especially if you've got an effective vaccine. But we see just the opposite. We see the dark blue bar and the green bar taller than the light blue bar. It's crazy.
So maybe you see this pull forward effect here in 2023, where it goes negative. The excess deaths go actually negative. There are fewer deaths for 85 plus than you would expect.
Yeah,
see this year in 20. So
that's quite possible because of the ones the few people that did take not just the first 2 shots but the boosters every year were the elderly, the most elderly. They were the most afraid of COVID and what it could do to them. So as you know, multiple shots could, the more shots you take.
Right. And they are also the ones with the most comorbidities and the ones who would have died anyway. It didn't take that much for them to die because they were very old and fragile.
Death before COVID came around was about 80 years old. And guess what the average age of death was during COVID? It was 80 years old. So it was just like, it didn't really do a whole lot.
We went over this the paper survey that you did at the Funeral Association convention in Franklin, Tennessee. And I hope that next year or maybe later this year, you're going to talk at a funeral director convention in a blue state with a much higher vaccination rate.
I would love to do so. I don't know if California or Illinois or Massachusetts or New York is going to invite me.
You have to find out who's on there.
I'm not going to hold my breath, Amelia.
Yeah, well, you have to find out who of the presidents are on their way out. Maybe your friend, what was his name, Taylor Moore in Tennessee, can help you find out who's on their way. And then you have to target these guys. They are the ones who are willing to talk.